I want to thank you and CIAE for the invitation to come and give a talk here. It's a wonderful center. A lot of interesting work happens here. The first mistake is the one that is made by many children on this problem. Ellen and Kim are running around the track. They run equally fast, but Ellen started later. When Ellen has run 5 laps, Kim has run 15 laps. When Ellen has run 30 laps, how many has Kim run? But what we see is that the children in Flanders in Belgium do not so bad in grade 3, but become worse up to grade 6. So 6th graders do not so well as the 3rd graders do. It becomes a little bit better afterwards, but children never learn to do this problem very well. Students in university make a lot of mistakes here. And the mistake they make is they think Kim has 3 times as many laps as Ellen. 5 times 3 is 15. So Kim has 30 times 3 is 90 laps. That is their mistake. What the point is that I want to make is that the activity of solving word problems, so if you put children in a classroom and let them solve word problems, they are doing something completely different than when they solve problems in real life. So the classroom word problem is a very different reality than the real life reality. And that's what Leif here is claiming. And it also comes forward if you say a Christmas, so these are problems like a shop sells 312 Christmas cards in December. How many will it sell in January, February and March? The children tend to think 3 times as many. There's no good reason. Very often, students are successful with superficial approaches. We are not always aware of it, but very often they can be superficially reasoning and still successful. They know what operation to use because it's the name of the chapter, for instance. They see keywords in the word problem and they know what to do. We are always valuing speed at certain moments. Sometimes in a classroom we pose a problem and the first student who raises his hand gets to answer and all the others have to listen to the answer. So unconsciously we're valuing speed. We have to be aware that students are not always very cognitively committed to the tasks they receive. They often are not motivated enough to think really deeply, so they often will remain superficial.
But first, the concept of spontaneous focusing on numerosity, what is it then? Well, if we look at young children and their early numerical development, we can distinguish between 2 different components of this early numerical development. On the one hand, cognitive factors, the abilities, the knowledge and the skills of the children, like for instance their ability to count objects. And on the other hand, we have the dispositional factors, the inclinations, children's motivation and also their attentional processes. And spontaneous focusing on numerosity, or SFON, the concept I will use, is related to these dispositional factors, the inclinations. And it was a concept that was originally defined by Hanula and Lehtinen, Finnish researchers. And they said this spontaneous focusing on numerosity is an attentional process for numerical information. And it has 3 important characteristics. First, it is spontaneous. Children do it by themselves. It's not because other people ask them to focus on the number that they do it. No, it's something they do spontaneously during their activities. It's an attentional process, so it has to do with attention and not with abilities. And it's not a general attention process, but an attention process specifically focused on something. And the focus is on numerosity, on exact number of objects, of items in your environment. The most frequently used imitation task is the parrot task, where you use a parrot, like here or here, and this parrot, he loves berries. So children see a parrot accompanied by boxes of berries in different colors. And what the experimenter does is feeding the parrot with these differently colored berries. And the parrot is always accompanied with 2 boxes of berries. And in each box you have different colors of berries. And the experimenter feeds the parrot with a small number of berries from each color, 1 up to 3 berries per color. And then the child is asked to do exactly the same as the experimenter did. And here again, the picture contains both numerical and non-numerical information, like this one. A child could focus on yellow chicken or 3 chickens. And you have lots of things you could focus on in the picture: the color, the scene, the story behind it, or the exact number of trees, children, clouds in the air, etc. Now, on the basis of mainly these 2 types of tasks, researchers found that already 2- and 3-year-old children focus on number in their daily life environment, that they spontaneously attend to number when they are confronted with these tasks. But you have large difference between children. Some children focus on number and other children don't. And it seems to be something stable. Children who do it on a young age do it later on again and in the different types of tasks. And very importantly, SVAN was shown to be correlated with both concurrent and later mathematical abilities. Children who attend to numbers spontaneously, they were shown to have better numerical abilities, including verbal counting skills, and they also tended to perform better during primary school in later years on mathematical tasks. So it seems to be an important predictor for later mathematical development.
Vamos a hacer esta charla más como un conversatorio, una reflexión sobre la identificación de los trastornos específicos del aprendizaje. ¿Qué ha pasado con este tipo de trastornos desde el diagnóstico tradicional, desde cómo típicamente se han identificado, y cuál es la nueva arista que al respecto están viendo las neurociencias y particularmente las neurociencias educacionales? ¿Qué son las neurociencias educacionales? Es el área que intenta desarrollar estrategias, métodos y herramientas que permitan que la enseñanza y el aprendizaje estén de acuerdo con el desarrollo neurofisiológico del individuo y particularmente con su desarrollo cognitivo. Hay niños que tienen estrategias que le compensan sus problemas y que llegan a resolver y hacer bien los ejercicios, pero con estrategias más inmaduras. Hay algunos niños que ya están en 4º básico y cuentan con los dedos tablas de multiplicar que ya deberían saber desde 1º o 2º. Ya, pero sin embargo logran decir el resultado. Pero cuando las exigencias comienzan a aumentar, estos niños empiezan a quedar detrás. Pero cuando comienzan a quedar detrás, después que ha pasado un periodo inmenso y en el cual no los hemos identificado. Esto fue un estudio que se hizo en Cuba, donde se evaluaron más de 11.000 niños desde 2º básico hasta 9º grado. O sea, ya sigue continuo, no es como acá que después divide en 1º básico, no, de 2º hasta 9º. Y fíjense acá, un 79% de niños sin dificultad. Y hay alrededor de un 21% de niños que todos tienen dificultades en el aprendizaje. Si solo fuesen evaluados con test de rendimiento académico, tendríamos un 21% de niños con dificultades en el aprendizaje. Sin embargo, de una evaluación más especializada se encontró que de ellos, solo el 5% tenía dislexia o descalculia. Hay otro 7% que tiene dificultades generalizadas del aprendizaje y otros que tienen trastorno por déficit de atención e hiperactividad. Pero fíjense cómo esta clasificación muchas veces o pasa desapercibida o se va dentro de este grupo, ya cuando son niños que realmente necesitan otro tipo de intervención.
Bueno, yo recuerdo cuando estaba en la universidad, no hace mucho, y siempre se nos inculcó mucho el ser un profesor, un pedagogo, que potencie la investigación en su práctica educativa, para poder ir mejorando nuestras metodologías y realmente hacer avances cada año que uno va trabajando. Entré al sistema escolar y era algo que yo lo tenía como súper decidido. Pero hubo algo que fue un obstáculo y que es un obstáculo muy grande, y es el tiempo.
It is a challenge, I think, as teachers to implement research, no doubt. And one of the reasons I think is that we as researchers do not put enough effort in making research easy to implement. The implementing of research should not necessarily be in the direct sense of, I mean, it's great that you are here and that you come and listen to the research and think about implementing it, but I think it can also go in many indirect ways. You're all hopefully using educational materials that you partly make yourself, but also buy from publishers. I mean, there are things like textbooks and so on. Hopefully, some of the insights of education come into textbook materials and so on, so that indirectly you are using research results in practice without necessarily having a very direct line.
The idea of teachers as co-researchers, that you have research teams that are partly only researchers and mainly teaching people who can inspire each other, like a teacher in an elementary school who has 1 day a week to contribute to the research, not just implement what we do, but together with the researcher think of a highly relevant practical problem in primary education and do a study together. Then it's directly relevant, and you are the researcher yourself and take it to your classroom. In addition to our translation of research results to teacher training institutes, to textbooks, so that teachers can use it, and your feedback on it to inspire us. It's important to have these co-teams of researchers and teachers to make it really relevant and communicate it to practice as well.
Que los profesores de universidad vayan a las escuelas, conozcan los niños como son los niños, que vean cómo juegan, cómo se visten, cómo huelen, cómo gritan. Y resulta que eso no existe. En la escuela de medicina los profesores hacen una clase teórica y van al hospital público con sus alumnos desde primer año y hacen clases donde ponen en práctica sus conocimientos. Yo no sé de profesores de universidades que vayan a una escuela vulnerable y hagan una clase.
El otro día vi algo muy simpático, así un monito, el padre le decía al niño, ¿en tu escuela hay muchos extranjeros? Y él decía, no, en mi escuela solo hay niños. O sea, para ellos todos somos iguales. Las diferencias las empezamos a poner nosotros. La cultura les empieza a enseñar las diferencias. Todos somos iguales. Todos tenemos derecho a aprender lo mismo. Y es verdad que en los sectores vulnerables hay otros elementos en los que hay que poner mayor atención.
Dentro de todo sistema, siempre es importante detectar una problemática, porque a partir de ahí se puede mejorar. Entonces, las 3 investigaciones de ustedes, yo veo que hay un proceso de búsqueda de algo. Entonces, mi pregunta es, luego de este proceso que ustedes están en la detección, ¿dónde ustedes proyectan sus investigaciones? ¿A dónde quieren llegar?
Sí, yo creo que como la idea nuestra es clara. O sea, hay que buscar cómo identificar mejor, cómo llevar eso a la práctica real, porque ya como les dije al principio, en investigación hay mucho. O sea, si solo lo tenemos en artículos publicados, si solo lo tenemos en estudio de laboratorio, no estamos resolviendo realmente el problema.
Understanding the problem very well is almost the solution. If you are a competent teacher and you know that children make particular mistakes or do not pay attention to things that are apparently important for later on, is almost a solution, because a competent teacher can handle that. Especially if you have a good training, etc. You have inspirational materials, and that's why I also think we should feed research into textbook writers.